Operation Paperclip was our covert action to bring the very best scientists from Nazi Germany to the US to enable our defense program, in particular our rocket and space program. You can think about how hard that would be. These were our sworn enemies. These were horrible people. They did horrible things. They absolutely did. But they were, without exception, the world leaders in this capability. And they could either fall into the hands of the Soviets, or we could bring them here, hold our nose, and figure out how to rehabilitate them and use that for our own economic prosperity and national advantage and security.
How did we get them? Do you know anything about that?
CIA operation. You know, the reason it was called Paperclip is like, that's how we told. So they would come in through the front door through State Department, which obviously would screen out Nazis. So you had to have some sort of cover, some sort of ability to do it. And we would have these files and we would resettle them. This is how Huntsville got started. Hey, where can we put these people where it'll be a little low vis, low profile? And, you know, we built a whole space industry in Huntsville, Alabama around Wernher von Braun and his colleagues.
Shyam Sankar, Chief Technology Officer and employee number 13 of Palantir Technologies.
But I think what's really instructive about Operation Paperclip is there was two competing programs. One was Operation Paperclip, and the other one was called Fiat. Fiat was this idea that we don't need these dirty scientists. Let's just steal the scientific papers. Let's take the technical documents, and we'll be able to learn from the documents alone. It was a catastrophic failure. It turns out there is something special about the human, separate and apart from just what they wrote down on a piece of paper.
Spent over 2 decades building and delivering disruptive software and AI solutions for the government and the private sector. Do you want to talk about Epirus a little bit? I love that company.
Yeah, I think it was a great bet by Joe very early on to take an entirely different approach to this gallium-based semiconductor material to generate walls of energy. You're really putting a wall of energy, so it doesn't matter if it's one drone or 1,000 drones. It's going to have the efficacy of being able to stop them and block them.
So what was it at the beginning you guys were doing when you came on as employee number 13?
It was really hard because none of us had worked in government, and we were really eliciting feedback from them. Like, okay, I built this. Until we got to a threshold of conviction. And that threshold of conviction, almost to the point, it started because of a renegade analyst. And I think she's been a prior guest of yours, actually, Sarah Adams. In-Q-Tel brought a fresh, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed cohort of CIA analysts out to the West Coast.
I want to dive a little bit more into the reverse opium war.
China. They may be America's most formidable foe ever. I'm talking about competing against them economically as well as militarily. They're winning an undeclared war as well. All about fentanyl.
The Chinese felt like a lot of drugs were flooding into China. The reverse opium war is the Chinese are funding and enabling fentanyl precursors to be shipped to Mexico to then be funneled into our country. I think some of this is our own conflicted and I think retrograde feelings of, is it the fault of the person who's using the drug? But you have to really step back and recognize the environment that's what is enabling all of this to happen. These precursors are coming from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the Chinese have so much control over their economy, if they didn't want it to go, it wouldn't go. And I think they view it as part of their national interest to undermine us from the inside. It is an asymmetric way of weakening us. In China alone has more than all the shipbuilding capacity of all the US combined, right? They have 250 times the shipbuilding capacity that we do.
250 times?
Yeah. I think the Russians are losing roughly 1,500 people a day to these little drones. So that's one piece of it, and then I think that also implies that the fighting force is going to have to be more technical. They're not going to have to be coders, but the responsibility, just like, you know, if you're going through Green Beret qualification, you learn everything about the gun, you know how to assemble it, disassemble it. Well, they're going to be that level of proficiency you're going to need for a set of technical capabilities. They're going to be decisive on the battle space. and that it's going to extend to electronic warfare and cyber attacks and space-based access and communication, all the way through to the end lethal effects.
How much of the military right now is obsolete with all the new tech and all the autonomous vehicles and weaponry?
A meaningful portion is. The question is, how do you know what that portion is? And I think there's a fair amount of good debate that needs to happen about that.
Before we go into the future of warfare, we were talking about Operation Paperclip. And so just downstairs, I just had a thought, should we be doing that today?
We should. Operation Paperclip 2 should really be around reindustrialization.